I try and keep this in sync. It's the 19th of November 2023 at 6 o'clock. This is a system report with a USB hub, okay, with everything plugged into it. Currently, I don't know what billboard it is, if you can see this. It thinks that my T7 is still plugged in. Yeah, this is the T7. It's not plugged in right now. The USB to hub, SPDIF, keyboard, USB receiver, and Pro keyboard. And it still thinks, I think at this point in time, that it thinks that the WD Western Digital 4 terabyte, go back to that in a second, I'll show you. Okay, so that's the elements. We'll just click on that really quickly. This 4 terabyte drive, which I just copied files, no problem whatsoever. From that all worked fine. It still seems to think that that's plugged in. Now, if I unplug this cable, which is the hub, I would assume, and maybe I'm wrong about this, that should basically, this whole hub and everything that's plugged into it should come off. Like, all right, the keyboard should stay on, but this isn't plugged in at the moment. That's the T7. And if I try to plug it into the front, wasn't recognizing before, it probably work now. Okay, so that drive's just been plugged in. And it won't work, and it refuses to work. I'm trying to keep this under 2 minutes. So my conclusion that I've been able to ascertain, I think so far, is there's a major communication error going on with the USB ports, the USB, all this communication stuff. It's just, there's something wrong with the architecture underneath it. The Thunderbolt ports will work. I'm trying to do this really fast. So I can plug it into the rear. It will recognize it, and it is a Thunderbolt, but it doesn't run Thunderbolt speeds, even though it's on that cable. It does, in theory, should connect. Yeah, there we go. Now, there's nothing on that drive at the moment, and it's Mac OS journaled. So that's, yeah, Mac OS journal. That was all a test that I did originally. And that's the T7. That's the rear port. But if I dismount it, I would have thought it should just dismount from this bus. But things like, if I dismount it, let's try this. It does nothing. Let's eject. We're going to eject that. You would think that would eject from here. That would be logical. But I don't know why it doesn't do that. I can copy files from the rear, but anything I try and plug in like these to the front, which weirdly I thought it worked, but it won't recognize the drive. It initially recognized it when I plugged it in, and it worked. And now, like, you can't even see the buses or whatever. It won't. Anyhow, look, I'm trying not to be emotional about this. So the long and short of it, what I believe is the problem, and I can go to Thunderbolt's right above it, and it says USB. That's interesting. It says 4, but none of these, even when I have it plugged in, but I can plug that into the rear. Let's just demonstrate that real fast, right? It doesn't matter because it doesn't even recognize it. And bear with me. I apologize. This has now become a longer video than I originally anticipated. Trying to prove a point. So that definitely recognizes the drive. Okay, but if I go to any of the Thunderbolt ports, you can see here, if you can see it, none of it's, even though it's connected to a Thunderbolt port, that's the rear. Okay, the 4 at the back. Okay, but I go to USB, and none of these, I think, hold on, let me see if I can get it to show. SPDIF. It still thinks the elements drive's connected, which is very strange. This is really weird. So it sees T7's not plugged in, which is really strange. And that's the T7. I'm trying to find it. Sorry, guys. So anyhow, if I go into that, and this is the drive that was, or sorry, the file is 20 gig. I have no problem copying that. Hold on, that should take about 2 minutes. Copying is a little slow going back over to it. The part that is bizarre is the fact that it won't even, like, before I was able to see that it would recognize the Sabrent. I don't know if you can see the logo, just to be clear. The Sabrent connector. And then the WD blue, Western blue, drives 400 gig. And it's very strange. Like, it still seems to think that the Western Digital 4 terabyte, which is not plugged in, is plugged in. It thinks it's there, but it's not. And you can see that this is that file that's copied. And ever since I tried to copy any files from the front ports, everything's failed. And now none of the front ports will work except with the Western Digital when I plug this in. It will recognize that. But if I try and plug that, which just worked, okay, so that file that was copied from a device that's not even showing up on here, it copied fine. I can eject. Oh, hold on, stand by. I don't know why they've done that like that. And that all worked fine. So you can do that. And then I'm going to just eject. Hold on, stand by. Eject this drive, which worked fine from the rear, even though it doesn't acknowledge its existence on the USB hub thing. It's like it doesn't exist. I'll take that, which was plugged into the rear, through a Thunderbolt port, even though it's running over the USB-C bus. And this is where I think it gets confused. When you just plug that into the front, it's straight up. Like, is it even going to connect? And every time, ever since the first time I copied a file, I couldn't believe it worked. Second, and then I went, oh, I'll copy a different one and see if that does anything. And you can see here that nothing's coming up. And I mean, if I open a new, yeah, it's just nothing. The network shows up, but it doesn't acknowledge the drive's existence. And so, yeah, the long and short of it so far that I've been able to ascertain is there is a communication error within the USB. I don't know what you want to call this, hub protocol. It doesn't, like, the fact that it still thinks, and I know I'm repeating myself, it still thinks that the Samsung T7, you see here, Samsung Electronic T7 with 2 terabyte, which I've reformatted as Mac OS Journal to see if that made a difference, which it doesn't seem to. It still thinks that's connected, but that's this drive right here, which is not connected. The other hubs, sorry, the white balance keeps changing. Just doesn't acknowledge them. And then it seems to acknowledge this one, but I've got 2 plugged into that. So like I've got the hub plugged into it, and then I've got a separate one for the keyboard and for the mouse and all that stuff. And again, it thinks that this 4 terabyte, which is Mac OS Journal, is still plugged in. And it's not a 7-minute video. Anyhow, so there's some kind of communication error with all this that seems to be occurring. And I've seen forums where, or a thing over here, hold on, stand by. So I just created this, not happy. So on Reddit, there's people complaining about a known problem with the USB ports. And it's kind of insane. RF interference is irrelevant. I think there's a specific issue in the communication. And then like when you plug one of the, I believe when you plug one of these in and it's an SSD and it reads and writes at a particular speed, it trips this whole, I don't know what, but it seems to trip everything out. Then it all fails, stops working. You have to reboot the computer or whatever. And it's just ridiculous. The USB ports don't work. That's basically the primary conclusion I've come to. Or they don't work, they work sporadically, or when you want them to work, they don't work the way you want. And the only ports that seem to work and can kind of work with any consistency are the 4 Thunderbolt ports, which also, I guess, second as USB-C proper ports, but they seem to function, even though they don't recognize properly up here, as you've seen, they seem to function. They seem to run. But the other ones, the 2 front USB-C ports and the 2 USB-A ports, the rear, they fail consistently. And they seem to trip out. And what I've found is like the only one, like if I, this is becoming ridiculously long, but if I plug this drive in, this won't recognize it. This is Mac OS Journal, that's exFAT. But if I plug this in, that, even though it's already acknowledged that it's there, the drive will, I hope, or will pop up. You can hear it spinning. There it goes. And the strange part is I could take something like this file and that will copy, no problem. At about the same speed, a little bit slower than it would on an SSD with some 4K. But I mean, you can see the write speed, which I wish Mac would, I only recently learned this, was like there's a difference between megabits and megabytes, and anything in a write speed is always in megabits. Megabits or megabytes? Yeah, megabits, not bytes. But this consistently works and it doesn't fail. I mean, but what's weird is it does acknowledge the drive here. I'm not going to do this right now because the video is long enough. Anyhow, I'm going to have to do a series of tests, and I can eject this. But again, I can tell you, it's like I can take that, which is the same thing. This is Mac OS journal as well, just to prove this will not recognize the drive. This is Mac OS journal. It's just different cable, and it just won't do anything. So I think there is something specifically wrong, and I don't know what, but in terms of their communication, the protocol, the buses that's running, all the architecture that's running the USB, there's something wrong with it. And it doesn't seem to be just me. It seems to be multiple people with the Mac Studio. There's something wrong with the USB bus, and Apple doesn't seem to want to acknowledge it. They're like, oh, we've tried it, and I've taken it in twice to the Apple Store. So yeah, okay, just to clarify, so today is the 19th of November, 2023. It's just gone 1814. USB hub just doesn't work on this computer at all, or at least the USB-C ports, and then a failure to recognize. As you can see, the T7 has been dismounted. It's not there. The elements, which is the 500, it's not there. So I'll leave it there. It's getting boring, so I'll try and keep it concise. Not really.